if nothing else, if you didn't remember anything else from today, what would be the key takeaway? And I think it would be the following, and this comes out of so much of the work we've been doing here and my work with different groups and in different venues, and that is the emphasis on us as a collective, on us as a team, on us as the same team, and not an emphasis on us as individuals who are unconnected to the community. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time in a moment talking again about community health. And some of you might be thinking, why is he going to do that? I thought this is what we're talking about. It's because this is what we're talking about. Because an emphasis on understanding the health of the community is integrally related to an emphasis in understanding the success of Operation 100%. And my dad was a physician, and he used to tell us, if you don't have your health, you're no good to anybody. You can't do the work. And so it's very important that we understand how to take care of ourselves, but also how to take care of each other, which is a way of taking care of ourselves. And so if there's nothing else we take away from this, it's the idea that we are a collective body. We are one. We are a unit. We are a team, and we need to understand ourselves as the same team. Here's the point. This is the goal. This is the mission. We're going to talk about this, student success. My family in medicine talks about patient care. We talk about student care. That's the goal, not ourselves individually. Anything that helps strengthen our ability to achieve that goal, that's good. Anything that gets in the way is bad. And again, my brothers could tell you about their friends who are surgeons who will tell their teams, when we get to the OR, when we get to that door, you leave your ego at the door. You leave your conflict at the door. You leave your problems at the door. That patient is our mission. Those of you who've been in the Marines or who know Marines know exactly what I'm talking about. Whatever arguments you have in the barracks, when you're on the mission, you're on the mission. You're one team. You leave no one behind, period. So I really want to make sure that we come away as we listen to all of this and talk with each other. Whatever issues we have with each other, we can work them out. There's nothing we can't work out. There's nothing we can't deal with, okay? So it's that idea of a community and a collective that I would like for us to try to take away. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, because this is college-wide. Again, go back to the point of our being a team. This isn't about the faculty's sole responsibility to help students succeed. There is no such thing as sole responsibility in life. That's an illusion. That assumes that someone is isolated from everyone and everything else. There's no such thing. There's only collective responsibility in this regard. There's individual responsibility to a certain point, but there's collective responsibility. And in some circles, they talk about this as co-responsibility, okay? So this isn't just about faculty's role. This isn't just about the advisor's role. This isn't just about any of our roles. This is about the collective role. So it's important that everybody be in the room and be in on the conversation with that. You know, there's another piece to this. As I was going over this yet again this morning, I was thinking, one of the things I remember when I was faculty and I taught writing was, God, if I had $1 for every time at the beginning of a writing course, especially the developmental writing courses that I taught, that a student presented me with the lifelong issues that have kept her or him from succeeding well in the subject matter. And I thought to myself, how do I even start? So a lot of you know what I'm talking about, that I'm supposed to hit the ground running tomorrow. And yet I'm supposed to make up for 18, 20, 25 years of things that didn't go right. This is my point about the collective. We're used to focusing on the individual and not on the collective to understand how to deal with these issues. The question is, where was everybody for that student for 25 years? Where were the teachers? Where was the community? Where was the family? Where was the government? I mean, whatever you want to pinpoint, where was everybody? By the time that student comes to my class, it's too late for me to make up all that work, you see? So I understand the difficulties here. If we really get that concept, we should be able to rely on each other in a collective way to reach solutions. And I think you'll see as we go through Operation 100%, as we go through the PowerPoints and we do our work, that, that's really what this is all about. On one of the slides, you'll see, I'll give you a preview, that some of you have seen these before. We've dropped the metric on course success. And when we get there, I'll tell you why, but I'll give you a preview. And that is, a lot of faculty were concerned that all the responsibility was falling on them. And we took that very seriously, and that was one of the key reasons we decided not to go that route. Okay, to help you with this work also, a couple of other things. A couple of folks have said to me, you know, some folks might think, you know, administrators come and go. This is like, we'll ride it out, and then, you know, we'll move on to the next flavor of the month or whatever. I know what you're talking about for those of you who are thinking about that. I lived through that myself. I'm in my, I think, 32nd year in this business now, and I know exactly what that feels like. This is not a flavor of the month. If you've been following the national conversations in higher ed, you know this is not the flavor of the month. This is about best practices in changing culture in higher ed to really achieve the kind of student success that now even the White House is going to start watching. This is way beyond flavor of the month. In fact, if there's a second takeaway from today, it's this. If we do our work well together, this initiative should outlast everybody in this room. I don't mean to be hyperbolic and dramatic about this example, but you know, when the founding fathers were putting together a country, I don't think they had in mind, let's see what works for the next couple of weeks, right? They wanted to build a government, a structure, a philosophy of governing that would outlast all of them. You see what I'm saying? That's the idea. The idea is that we're building something that's not just for our current students, but for our future students as well. If we do our work well, this should outlast all of us, okay? All right, in addition, I've mentioned this book in several venues. Okay, watch this teacher trick. Can you all see that in the back? Yeah. You know how they do that, right? Okay, I know. Why do we do that? Anyway, this is the book. This is the book called Flawless Execution by James D. Murphy, and it's a book that we're using as sort of the grounding for management practice in terms of operationalizing Operation 100%. That's, my graduate school teachers would kill me if they heard me say that, okay? Why are you turning all those things into nouns and gerunds and so forth? Anyway, if you have a chance to purchase that book, take a look at that book. We have some copies around. We can do some lending if we need to. It's really important because we're going to be referring to concepts there throughout our work. James Murphy was a fighter pilot in the military. He flew those, help me, FA-18, 16, you know, really fast. They could do amazing things within seconds. You know what I'm saying? Okay. And here's the point. He says, you know, in the missions they did, a 1-second mistake could be my death. They had to execute flawlessly. And so the emphasis was on what you needed to do as a team to make sure that you accomplished the mission flawlessly. Now, when folks haven't read the book and they've heard me talk about this happened at a meeting in DC last year at some time. In fact, a college president said, well, I don't know about that, you know, you have to expect that people are going to make mistakes. And this was a small group discussion. Now, this was probably impolite on my part, but I said, you didn't read the book, did you? No. I said, well, if you read the book, what you'll discover is that, in fact, Murphy is well aware that people make mistakes. The idea is that your goal is to execute flawlessly. That's always your goal. And he gives an example, a couple of places in the book, in which a basketball player, I think a pro basketball player, said to him at one point, man, we gave up a lot of points on the way to that win. Okay? In other words, you're going to make mistakes, and in fact, sometimes you abort the mission. He talks about that. Sometimes you abort the mission. But aborting the mission is already part of the plan if necessary. You follow what I'm saying? In other words, you never want to fall into a mistake. You always want to plan as much as possible. So we're using this book as a backdrop, if you will, and you might want to take a look at that. Okay, at the kickoff meeting in the fall, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but this is just so important. I really don't want to overlook it. You remember I said at the kickoff meeting that we're going to be launching this Operation 100%, but really, if we don't have a strong, healthy community, it's not really going to matter what we do, because we're not going to really be able to do the work. I've repeated this talk as much as I can in various venues. I've talked to the Senate about it. I've talked with, at the English department retreats, we've talked about it. And I think there are just a couple of key points that I want to re-emphasize, and for some of you hearing this new, this will be an introduction to the concepts. And the important thing here really is these are concepts that are important not just in theory, but in practice. These aren't meant for us just to understand theoretically. It's really meant for us to practice, and to practice without blaming and shaming. We live in a blame and shame culture. We all know that. We know that from our families, from our communities, from our work environments, and that's in the plural. Why, I don't know. I mean, I would need to defer to those of you with psych degrees to help me understand why the culture is so blame and shame oriented. But I think we all know what I mean. It is. And I think if we ask ourselves, how do we feel when we feel blamed and shamed? Then we probably know how our friends and colleagues and coworkers feel, because they feel the same way. And if the goal is to have us work through problems, get along, figure out how to do the mission, then blaming and shaming is not going to help. As a matter of fact, it's going to hurt. It's going to have people, build walls of defensiveness, which makes sense psychologically, right? Your mind is going to protect you. And it's going to say, shut down, I'd rather not go there, I'd rather not. I can't tell you how many times when I've talked to faculty about, why haven't you tried to do X, Y, and Z that's out of the box and creative? And I've been told by them, I'm not taking that risk. I'm not going to get my hand slapped. I'm not going to, right? And I've thought, well, we got to change that. We got to change that. Innovation and success occurs when you're willing to take that risk. Some of you have heard me say that I love the James Brown song, nothing beats a try but a fail. And my wife said, well, what does that mean anyway? I said, I don't know, but I really like the line, right? Nothing beats a try but a fail. I mean, for me, part of what it means is if you're not trying, if you're not willing to take the risk, you're never going to innovate. You're never going to go anywhere. So we got to make sure that we don't have a blame and shame culture. And the way we do that is our own practice. It's not about saying, yeah, well, I get it. I try not to do that, but he does it. That's blaming and shaming. We got to get away from that. We really do. Keep your eye on the prize. Keep your eye on the mission. If we want the mission to succeed, all of us, and if you think that I'm just speaking and saying you need to do it, you're wrong. You don't know how much I struggle with this myself. I am nowhere near perfect. But as one of my spiritual teachers used to tell us, the goal is to be whole, not to be perfect. So I'm suggesting that we all really take some accountability for this, all of us, I included. I always am trying to figure out, is there a better way to have done this so that next time we create a different kind of atmosphere within which we can work, okay? This is so important. One of the concepts that I want to reemphasize that I talked about last fall is the concept of non-duality, or what Thich Nhat Hanh calls interbeing. He does this in a funny way. He says, to be or not to be, that is not the question, right? And the concept here, and again, I don't want to go into a lot of detail, and some of you know this much, much better than I, and I know that from talking to you, that you get this much better than I. But the concept is that none of us exists in isolation. There is no separate self. He uses various examples to show this that are very interesting. He talks about a sheet of paper, right? Sometimes you say, use a single sheet of paper, right? But there's no such thing as a single sheet of paper. He says, if you look at a sheet of paper, you might think this paper exists in isolation. He says, but if you have the ability to look deeply into that sheet, what you'll see the trees that were used to make the paper. You'll see the loggers who had to do their work to cut down the trees to make the paper. You'll see the ingredients that made up the breakfast of the loggers who needed to be healthy to cut down the trees. You'll see the sun, because without sun, there's no rain. Without rain, there's no trees, no paper. He says, if you look deeply into this single sheet of paper, you'll realize that it has no separate existence as a sheet of paper. It exists only in an interrelated way with everything else in the universe. Now you're wondering, well, how does that help me in my work here? Well, here's one way to translate it. As we work with each other, we need to remember that whoever we think we are as we present to each other isn't who we are. In a more complex way, we would say that the individual in front of us is the product of 4+ billion years of evolution who comes to us materialized in that moment, in that situation. That's a very different way of saying, oh, you're the bad guy. You're doing that. I know you. I know who you are. No, you don't. Probably very few of us in this room really know each other. Okay? So it's very, very important to understand this concept of interbeing. Because, the truth of the matter is, if one person suffers, everybody suffers. I can't be fully healthy if any of you is suffering, and vice versa. It doesn't mean there won't be suffering. It means there's a different way of understanding how we deal with the suffering. Do you see what I'm saying? Now, I know for some of you, you're thinking, this is weird. This guy is really strange. And in a moment, I'm going to actually read to you from a consultant who basically, in his own words, is saying the same thing. In fact, I'll read it to you now. I love this guy's work, Patrick Lencioni. He wrote Death by Meeting, one of my favorite books. But my favorite of his books is called The Advantage. Now, Patrick Lencioni is a world-renowned consultant. He works with Fortune 500 companies. He works with CEOs, major. This guy is major. I mean, absolutely major. In fact, one of the consultants we use, who is extremely high-end, uses his books, among others of the things that she refers to, okay? And here's what Patrick Lencioni says. This is a quote from The Advantage. The key ingredient for improvement and success is not access to knowledge or resources, as helpful as those things may be. It's really about the health of the environment. The key ingredient for improvement and success is not access to knowledge or resources, as helpful as those things may be. It's really about the health of the environment. And he goes on to say, I work with these companies and these CEOs, and it's clear that they don't lack knowledge, they don't lack experience, they don't lack access to resources. The ones who are struggling lack an environment of health. And the ones who are competitive and succeed are very healthy. What's one of the things that people look for when they're looking for where to work? Some people who have a little bit of luxury, right? They look for those ratings of best places to work. Best places to work. Now, companies aren't stupid. They're not stupid. I know some folks, trying to get jobs at Google, for example. If you check out Google on the West Coast, I mean, this, looks nothing like our environment. You could bring your dog, you can swim, you could do this, you could do all these different things there, right? They really know how to take care of you in a healthy environment. They also know that's going to lead to amazing productivity for them. They're not stupid. It's not either or. But the point is, they know if their employees are unhappy, if their environment is unhealthy, they're not going to get any work done. They also allow creativity and experimentation, by the way. A number of years ago, one of their employees was messing around with email and came up with something they decided would be useful. It's called Gmail. They allowed the person to mess around and to get things wrong. And what ended up happening was the creation of something that now is doing very well for them. Okay? All right. You with me so far? All right. Another line from Thich Nhat Hanh that I like, and I can't find the source now, which is really bothering me. I thought I had it at one point, and I'm finding various versions of it. He gives so many talks in so many venues and get transliterated and so on that sometimes it's hard to catch these, but it has to do with perception. How many times do we hear people say, well, these folks believe such and such, and you say, well, that's not accurate. Yeah, but that's their perception. How many times, you ever hear that? But that's their perception. As if we should say at that point, oh, okay, as long as that's their perception, that's all I needed to know. I hope you as faculty, those of you who are here as faculty, would never let your students get away with that. I hope what you would say to them is, okay, that's your perception. Is it accurate? I hope you would do that, right? And I bet you do. And I'll bet you get a little pushback sometimes. Occasionally? Yeah, okay. All right. Like all the time? Yeah. Because people feel guarded about their perceptions and their opinions, right? We use the possessive case to talk about it. My opinion, Joe's point of view, as if these things are material things that you own, and God forbid you ever give them up or someone try to steal them. You stole my idea. Really? Okay. You follow me? But perceptions. We need to challenge each other on perceptions. We need to be able to ask each other, well, are you sure you're right? Are you sure you, I mean, in a way that's not blaming and not shaming. That's the kind of thing you would do with students. Well, why do you believe that? What's your evidence? Faculty, come on. You know I'm telling the truth when I say this next statement. We are the worst at being held accountable for evidence in our meetings and things, right? I mean, God forbid someone say to us, where's your evidence, right? I mean, we go nuts. I've seen that every place I've been. Come on, let's just cop to it. We know that. We don't like being challenged like that, right? But it's okay. It's okay. All of us feel defensive when that happens. I do in my family. My kids do it all the time. Well, what's your evidence for that, Dad? What do you mean, what's my evidence? Of course I know. I'm your father. Yeah, that worked pretty well, okay? But you and I both know in these calm moments, right, it's a fair question. It's a fair question, right? And so if we find that someone is saying to us, well, you know, the folks think that you're going to, you know, dismantle all the programs. Well, why do they think that? I don't know, but that's their perception. Well, can we challenge that? Why do they believe that? Well, they heard you talking about programs. Okay. Maybe they need to deal with their stuff. You know, in other words, I do it too. Don't get me wrong. I do it too. Well, Thich Nhat Hanh says something very interesting about perceptions. He says, most of our suffering results from our attachment to wrong perceptions. And most of our perceptions are wrong. And he then recommends that we use our best calligraphy and write a big sign that says, "Are you sure?" and hang it in our room, our living room, okay? Right? But it's a really good point, and don't think it's easy for me. I struggle with this as much as anyone and more than many people, because after all, it's my perception. It must be right. In our culture that emphasizes so much the individual, it is hard for us to have this conversation about a collective. Those of you in the social sciences know this much, much better than I. This is your work. You've studied this for years. That in cultures that emphasize community, these are easier concepts for people to grasp onto. In English, what's the only personal pronoun that, other than Apple computers, is always capitalized? The only personal pronoun, always capitalized. I, not we. I. And if you've read Maxine Hong Kingston's The Woman Warrior, you might remember, she's Chinese American, you might remember that chapter in which she talks about reading in front of her class in elementary school and choking on the pronoun I, struggling to say that. And she's making the point that culturally it was so hard for her to wrap her head around emphasizing the I. This is why on search committees, I've met with some search committees, and I've said to them, try not to have the candidate sit at the front of the table, and try not to ask questions like, why are you the best candidate? Those are Western dominant culture questions that advantage people who are used to living in a world that emphasizes I. People who are enculturated not to go there are going to feel a little bit compromised by that. Instead, ask relational questions, ask collective questions. How can you contribute to the group, right? How can you best help the department or the division or the college? You follow what I'm saying? And actually, if a candidate were honest with that question, the candidate would need to say, I don't know, let me see all the other applications, and then I'll tell you at the end if I'm the best. How could I possibly know? But that's the perception. Sorry. Okay. Okay. So let's keep a tab on perception. That goes to health as well. Most of our suffering results from our attachment to wrong perceptions. One of the reasons I love that teaching is, and my wife helped me understand this, she grew up in the Nazarene Christian tradition, So she got soaked in hers, I got soaked in mine. We tried not to wet the kids too much because we both knew what that felt like. And they're doing all right. They're a little neurotic, but they're all right. We'll edit that out of the tape. All right. But she said to me, because I really love that teaching, and I was reading more of Thich Nhat Hanh's work. Don't remain attached to your anger. Don't remain attached to this. And she said to me, this is a struggle for people who grew up the way I did. I said, why? Now, I'm just saying what she said, okay? I didn't grow up in her culture. But she said, they were taught, don't get angry. Right? And I said, yeah, but you're human. What do you mean? And she said, look, I'm just telling you, you felt like a sinner, like bad. You were a bad person because you got angry. And she said she loved this kind of teaching because it told her, basically, it's okay to get angry. That's a human thing. But don't remain in anger. Don't remain attached to your anger. Don't say anything in anger. Don't do anything in anger. Take care of your anger in whatever way works for you. Take care of your frustration. Take care of your anger. We need you to do this. I am talking about Operation 100% right now. So that's important. And one of the things I learned in my own sort of social political life, taking part in protests and things like that, I'm just sharing a little with you, is when I was angry, I learned people didn't hear my points. They heard my anger, and they didn't listen. And so one of the key takeaways from all of this first part of the discussion today that I want to emphasize with you is it isn't if we practice helping each other, if we practice community health, if we practice taking care of each other, it isn't that we won't have problems. It's that we'll have better, more skillful means to use to solve the problems. We'll have ways to get beyond the problems, okay? And then I'll just do one more line from this, and then I would like to move into the Operation 100% stuff, if we can. And that's another line from Thich Nhat Hanh that I used at the beginning of my course on nonviolence. And it's from work of his called The Sun, My Heart. He says, quote, "When we realize our nature of interbeing, we will stop blaming and killing because we know that we inter-are." And I told the students, that's the entire course. Everything we study is going to come back to that concept. When we realize our nature of interbeing, we will stop blaming and killing because we know that we inter-are. So, with that as a little bit of a backdrop, oh, wait a minute, there was one more thing. Okay, here I need your help. And it's beyond today's stuff, but I want you to be thinking about this. So how do we get there? Leaving out like the most important part, the practice of the concept. Okay, all right. So how do we get there? Okay, well, one of the things, again, I've learned in my own work and in my studies, and when I did the course on nonviolence, is that if we wait until we have a problem to start figuring out how best to deal with the problem, it's too late. It's too late. We need to be prepared to deal with the problem in advance, which means we need to practice the mindfulness of taking care of ourselves all the time. We need to do that. And yes, we need to take care of yourselves. My wife, again, helped me understand this. She said, when you grow up as I did, thinking that to take care of yourself is being selfish, she said it's very tough to come to these teachings, although they're liberating, because we think, what do you mean take care of yourself? I've got all this work to do. Well, Thich Nhat Hanh isn't just sitting somewhere saying these things to students. He did the work of nonviolence in Vietnam during the Vietnam War. In fact, was exiled from Vietnam because the North thought he was a dupe of the South thought he was a dupe of the North, and they wouldn't let him back in for decades. He's worked with Vietnam vets. He tried to tell the the protesters here who are against the war that your anger and violence is causing a second war. You're not helping, okay? And he found in the work that they did that if they didn't take time regularly to just stop the work and become mindful and take care of themselves, they couldn't go on and do the work. Those of you who fly and bother listening to the instructions at the beginning of the flight, where they tell you like how to put a seatbelt on? Well, they talk about the oxygen mask. what do they tell you if you're flying with someone who's dependent on you? Put yours on first. Why? What, if you don't and you die, you can't help that person. Taking care of yourself first is your most important practice in this regard. You cannot help others if you don't do that. My wife learned this the hard way. She is a social worker, but she's no longer practicing. She got burnout. And we knew in advance that that was an occupational hazard, and neither of us were skillful enough to see it coming. And by the time it happened, it was too late, and I'm admitting that. And so she could no longer practice. She got burnt out. She did not do what she needed to do to take care of herself. And now she doesn't have clients whom she can help, okay? So this is important. If we burn out, if we can't do the work, we can't get to this, okay? So I need your help in thinking about ways as an institution we can make this happen. I'll get us started with one I've asked the Senate about, we talked about, and that is, and I've talked to some others about, and that is if we had a mindfulness hour, I'm making this up as a starting point, that we had at the college in which we stopped our work and we allowed people to just take some time to take care of themselves. And that could be anything from taking mindful walks to having yoga classes, not getting together with faculty and colleagues and others and talking about work. No, you don't need a mindfulness hour for that. No. Again, if you're thinking, God, I was asked, what are the taxpayers going to say? I'm going to say, well, I don't know, what are they going to say if we can't do our work and succeed and help the students, right? I mean, to me, this is doing the work. I go back to Thich Nhat Hanh, who says in his book, Peace is Every Step, which I would highly recommend. In our culture, right, we have this concept, don't just sit there, do something. And they have a concept, don't just do something, sit there, okay? And the point is this. The point is, he says, we think of stopping as a reaction to life, but it's not. It's itself a way of dealing with life, and our survival depends on it, right? Those of you in the medical area, the health area, you know that when you have a patient in trouble, the first thing you do is to say, stop, breathe. That's the same practice. That's the same practice, okay? So what else could we do as an institution, with some institutional commitments to help each other in this way? So Operation 100%. This is the gig, Achieving Excellence in Student Learning and Success at Lansing Community College. It's not my vision. At this point, there are so many hands that have been involved in this, so many views, so many perspectives. It's a collective vision. And so here's where we're at this point. Here's the goal. Very simple. 100% completion for students in degree, certificate, and/or transfer pathways. Now, this is the slide I was referring to earlier. Some of you saw an earlier version of this slide, and you might remember that we had two sets of metrics. One was 100% success in course success, and we had 3-year metrics. And then 100%, I think it was improvement was the word we used, in degree, certificate, transfer completion. And that was a 6-year metric. One of your faculty colleagues spoke to me and said, you know, this, first of all, why is one success and one improvement? We hadn't caught that. But further, I kept hearing from faculty a concern that I was really, really paying attention to. And that was, no matter what you say, if you keep emphasizing the course, it's on me. And I don't want to get punished if my students don't make it, okay? And we heard that. Moreover, as I kept reading the literature, and some of us kept reading the literature and then attending conferences, we kept hearing that focusing on course success, although it's important, of course you want your students to pass your course, or whatever success means for your course, we began to learn it's a red herring metric. And at the Guided Pathways conference that we went to, and Christine's joining us from the faculty side on that project, and is going to help us lead that. They were straight up, and Rob Johnson will tell you, they were straight up, flat out on this concept. Davis Jenkins from the Community College Research Council out of Columbia University gave the presentation. He's done some of the best national work on this. And basically they said, we could show you dozens of transcripts of students who have all kinds of course success, but aren't even close to completing. They're floundering. They're not going anywhere. So we realized that, okay, regardless of our perception, the evidence was telling us, don't go there. So we decided to remove that as part of the thing that we're going to set as a goal and simply work in the course success component as part of the tactic and tasks that we work on together. And so we removed that. And the other thing was we thought that we should make the goal such that we weren't tied down to a specific time by which to complete. Again, this initiative should outlast all of us in this room. It should outlast all of us. But we felt, and I'm just going to be honest about this, who could argue that this is a bad goal, that every student who signs up for a degree gets one, that every student who signs up for a certificate gets one, that every student who says, I want to come to you first and then transfer is successful at it. So we thought this is a livable goal. This is a non-threatening goal. This is, in fact, one of my colleagues, Matt Fall, has been saying, this is a mission statement. That's really what this is. It's really a mission statement. That's what this is about, okay? We're concentrating on folks completing their degree or their certificate or transferring. We know that there are students who are here who don't have the intention of completing a degree or certificate, right, or transferring. We know that. Our plan is to track every single student. And if a student is coming here, for example, out of industry for a particular weekend training or something like that, we're going to track that student accordingly. You follow what I'm saying? In other words, we're not going to see that student as a failure in degree or certificate completion or transfer, because that was never the student's intention. Right now, across the country, community colleges are saddled with this problem, that students come to us, they get lumped into a general tracking. You know what our graduation rate is officially? Anybody know? 9%. Yeah, check out a FAFSA form for this college. 9%. Now, I'll bet you have far more than 9% success in your courses and your programs. That's my point. So I really appreciate the colleague who gave us that example. If we have a student who's not here to get a degree or a certificate or transfer, we're gonna track the student accordingly. And if the student is here for one course only and takes that course, then that's a success in that category, right? We want to emphasize the degree and certificate completion, though, for a number of reasons. One of which is this, and I probably should have mentioned this, and so I'm sorry I didn't. But the White House has been very serious about completion criteria and coming up with a value rating system for colleges across the country in terms of how well they're doing in that area. And if you're familiar with the national literature, you know the phrases like completion by design, complete college America. Everything's about completion. And what they're really looking at is degree completion and, to a lesser degree, certificate completion, but certainly degree completion. Folks, that's just the name of the game. That's the game we're in. We can't change that. And so we want to make sure that this effort focuses highly on the degree certificate transfer part of it. But to your colleague's point, and I really appreciate that he told me about this, we are not diminishing the importance of folks who come to us for other reasons. We want to make sure that they are absolutely successful as well. So as we do this work, we might need to have like a secondary goal to track those students as well. So I thank your colleague for alerting me to that. Okay, so future picture. This is right out of the work of James Murphy in Flawless Execution, and I want to explain to you what this is about. Basically, he says that the future picture, and he works with lots of companies, is, you know, what ideally your company, in our case, our institution, would look like, ideally, in the future were it to be where we want it to be, were it to achieve the success we want, okay? I'm quoting from his book. He says, the future picture is a well-written, clear, high-resolution, and easily communicated picture of what you want the future to be, okay? And he also says, this is very important, he says, executing is not enough. He doesn't mean killing, right? But he did that as well, right? Executing is not enough, right? He says, you must execute in the spirit of a future picture, or you will invariably execute against the wrong things. Let me tell you what he's talking about there. A lot of us would have to admit that we're doing a lot of great stuff at this college. I mean, a lot. I know in my office you get problems all the time, but I do get to talk to other people and make my way around and so on. We're doing a lot of great stuff. The problem is this: we're not alone in this. We're not alone. That's why these guys make money, okay? They go around and help folks with this. Are they all the right things to be doing? They might be really good things in and of themselves, but if they're not all tied to the future picture, then as he says, you could be doing a lot of good things, but you're not doing the mission. You see what I'm saying? I'm sure you've had this with students in your class who might be working on something outside of what you've assigned, and it was really great, but you didn't assign it. It's not what you're evaluating. It's not part of the syllabus. It's not part of the program. And now you're stuck in a tough position, right? That's really great, but that isn't what you're supposed to do, right? So your job, and it's hard, I remember this, right, was to try to get them back on track and to figure out a way to not have them lose face over that and so on. It's tough. It's not easy, right? But to say, but look, this is what I need you to be doing, right? So you could be doing a lot of good stuff, but if it's not aimed at the future picture, then it might not be really helping you execute the mission. And he gives an example of a future picture, and some people aren't going to like this, and I'm sorry. I mean, the guy is a military guy. I just try to see the greatness of the examples. But here's the example he uses. He talks about the first Gulf War. It used to just be the Gulf War when my students were in it. Okay, now it's the first Gulf War. Okay, hopefully there won't be another, but okay, that's editorial. All right. And he talks about the first President Bush, who gave what James Murphy considers to be an excellent example of a future picture. Okay, and I'm going to read it. Iraq will be out of Kuwait, Allied casualties will be low, collateral damage will be minimized so Iraq can recover quickly, Saddam's army will not be a regional power for at least 10 years, oil will flow freely in the region. Okay? So things like Iraq will be out of Kuwait. Notice what he doesn't, now that's clear, Iraq's going to get out of Kuwait. Notice he doesn't say, by Thursday at 12, and damn it, you're held responsible. No. That's not a future picture. Iraq's out of Kuwait. Oil flows freely. Minimal collateral damage, etc. Okay, whatever your views on war, that's not the point here. The point is the commander-in-chief needed to provide a future picture to the people doing the work so that they could get the mission accomplished. He then had the teams go to work to get this to happen. You follow me? Okay? So what we've done is to try to create a future picture for Operation 100%. So it needs to be clear enough that we know what the overall goal is, but not so micromanagey in its details that you feel your hands are tied in doing the work. Okay, so here's the first thing for our future picture. Notice the verbs in the present tense. In the future, this is what we want to say for the present. LCC is the premier community college for offering inspiring, engaging, innovative teaching and learning environments. Students, therefore, attend LCC with passion. Okay? Notice that we don't tell you how we're going to do that. Those are the tactics that we'll work on. But when people think of us, when I got here, you know one of the things I was told? You all know this. They told me what LCC stood for in the community for years. Last Chance College. Look at this first bullet. Okay? Each student follows an affordable, achievable, structured, guided program pathway to goal completion. That student who comes in for just one course, that would be the one little pathway that that person's doing, that's fine. But for degrees and certificates, okay, the student has an affordable, achievable, structured, guided program pathway to goal completion, and they follow that. Here's some subcomponents to that future picture. Each student has an education plan and a target completion date. Nobody's left out. Students have access to multiple learning modalities and schedule options that meet their diverse needs. And this is a big one that I'm going to get some help from members of the team on, okay? Students cannot remain on the wrong program pathway. We had a lot of discussion actually about the verb. I guess it's the helping verb, right? We didn't say students may not. We're not giving them, it's not permission. We're saying in our future picture of LCC that they won't be able to be on the wrong path. They won't be able to remain on the wrong path. Now, I mentioned to you that we sent a team that had representatives from, let's see, the provost cabinet, IT. I don't think we had faculty go on this one. This was a behind-the-scenes look at what Arizona State is doing. A couple of years ago, Arizona State's previous provost, published an article in Change magazine on e-advising. Some of you might have seen this article, in which they talked about automating the registration system and having students follow very structured, they didn't call it guided pathways at that time, but guided pathways. And if the students started to veer off, my understanding is they were stopped, and it required an intervention. We also learned from them that they have a minimum of 3 touches a term, right, for each student. Minimum of 3 times a term they touch each student. 82,000 students. Wrap your head around that. The point is, they realized if they didn't do that, this whole system would not work, okay? Students receive relevant, individualized, timely support. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking, well, we do that now. We do in some cases, and in many cases, and in some areas, and not consistently. We don't do it consistently. Why is another question. Could be resources, could be all kinds of things. Higher ed is very famous for being siloed. You've heard me say it, you know it, we're very siloed. It's very difficult in a siloed environment to think in terms of a collective, okay? So we're saying in our future picture, students, all students will receive this. And this is really key. Students always know their status and their progress. One of the things we've talked about with web redesign is, and this is, I keep pushing this example, we'll see if I actually get my way, I doubt it. I fly too much, so I always look at the airlines for these things. But if you fly Delta, which is one of the airlines I fly a lot, you'll see when you get up to your Delta page on your Delta screen, right, your own profile thing, in the upper left-hand corner, right, in the west, right, left to right, up, down, that's where our eye goes, okay, I see my status. Here's how many miles to go before I earn such and such a status, which really doesn't mean anything, but they tell me my status with incentives built in. I know what the incentives are when I get there. That's what we want to do for students. We want to have a dashboard that shows them their progress. They always know it. We always make sure they know it. We always have incentives built in so that as you keep moving along, you get more and more incentives and more rewards, so to speak, okay? That's the idea here. So this is the latest version of what we've come up with as a future picture. Again, we did not want to weigh it down with micromanaged details. Why? Because we need us to do the work. We need the teams to figure out in various contexts how to make this all work. But this we felt was, at this point, the clearest sense of the future picture that we could develop. So we have a driving question that we want to keep in front of us as we do this work, okay? And this gets to the point I made earlier about we might be doing a lot of things well, but are they the right things? So the question is this: how does, and fill in the blank, we just gave a few examples, how does my action, this process, this assignment I give in class, this expense that we're asking the college to undertake, whatever, how does this, whatever, help the college to achieve its Operation 100% future picture? And if we can't answer that question well, I think we need to ask ourselves, why are we doing it then? Okay? Does that make sense? That seem reasonable? And the answers might be a little trickier than we might think, okay? But I think that's really, really important for us, you know, as we develop programs and pathways, as we do all the intake, et cetera. Okay. And the last couple of slides, we want to talk about some commitments. And a number of you have talked to me in groups and individually about institutional commitments, and I really thank you for that and applaud you for that. I think you've really held us to accountability as an institution in all the right ways. So we wanted to see, as we work through this, what could we commit to? And I got some help from the Senate on this, so I think they'll see one of their items in here that we added, okay? So we commit to being a model, student-focused organization, maximizing student learning and success opportunities. We commit to undertaking initiatives aimed at helping the college achieve its student learning and student success-oriented goals. We commit to being a model customer service institution. This is the first of the last two slides, okay? What it means to be a model student-focused organization maximizing learning and success opportunities, that's for us to figure out. But in all of this work, one of the things we want to ask ourselves is this: how do we become the model that everyone else wants to imitate? We sent a team to Arizona State. We're sending a team to Georgia State at the end of the month. Their student demographic is a lot closer to ours than Arizona State's is, but Arizona State really has become a kind of national model for this work, okay? Georgia State did something very interesting here. They're a four-year school. They found that their retention rate, check this out, they found that their retention rate from year 1 to year 2 was pretty high, but their completion rate wasn't so good. So they did a really great move. They wanted to see how many students were retained year 1 to year 2, but got to year 2 in sophomore status. And what they found was that it dropped. So they retained, you see what I mean? They retained the students. So if we just focus on retention per se, that might not tell us much that we need to know. But retention with the progress you need to be at where you're retained, that's different. So when we talk about students transferring to a four-year school as a junior in good standing in their major, some of you have heard me talk about that. Let me tell you what I mean by that. I have talked to parents. My kid transferred to such and such a place and is taking freshman level courses in engineering, or you name the field. Yeah, they transferred successfully, not in their major. Now they got more work and more time to do. Follow me? So we're saying, right? Georgia State said, how do we get students to be second-year students as sophomores? And then they did the work they needed to do to help get that to happen. That started going up. Guess what? Their completion started going up. Okay? So what it means to be this kind of organization, those details we need to work out. The initiatives that we undertake, they have to go towards student learning and student success-oriented goals. And a model customer service institution. This one creates lots of interesting discussion at every college I've ever been at. First of all, okay, let me just cop to it up front. I know I used to be faculty, a lot of faculty bristle at the idea of calling students customers, and yet we freely talk about that they shop for class. Some colleges put a little shopping cart in their schedule thing, and students drop items into the cart. They shop. I think the problem is this, that we don't want to just look like a business bottom line model with students. I agree with all my faculty colleagues that that's not what the business is about, okay? On the other hand, people are paying money. They are making commitments. Our salaries do come out of that to some degree. We do it. There is a certain customer business aspect to the joint, okay? There is, and we can't forget that. I like to look at this customer service business in a much simpler way, really, without getting tied up into the, either or kinds of things I'm talking about. It's simply this. Where do I go to get my needs met in the business world? I tend to go to those places that have good quality products and great customer service. Okay, so I'll go to Nordstrom if I can afford it, not all the time, but I'll go to Nordstrom over some other places that I won't name because, as some of you might know, they are a gold standard of customer service, and when they hire customer service reps, they hire for that. They hire for that. And they know that customers, even if mistakes are made in the process of what you're buying, they know the customer will come back with good customer service. They know that, okay? So what does that mean? Well, I mean, just think of little things like hold time on the phone. Think of things like this. And this is meant, again, without blame and shame. I got to keep repeating that. I'm not interested in blaming and shaming. I don't come from there, and I don't want us to do that. Have you tried to navigate our website? Okay. How often would you shop at Amazon if Amazon's website looked like the websites of not just ours, but most colleges? Never. Probably never. I know when I taught that we were fiercely protective of academic freedom. But I also found over the years that we sometimes used that phrasing to talk about things that didn't really have to do with academic freedom. Okay? Believe me, that when I taught my Holocaust Studies course, I'm not making this up, I would let the dean know at what point in the course I was going to talk about the roots of Christian anti-Semitism as it relates to the Holocaust. Because if you've studied this material, you know that that's something really important you have to study. And I would tell them what week. You know why? There was always at least one person a semester who would come to the dean and complain that I was Christian bashing. So I gave him a heads up. And sure enough, it was usually only one, I had a pretty good track record, who would go there and I'm bashing Christians. I committed an ad hominem fallacy. I tried to use only the work of Christian Holocaust study scholars. And so I could say, but that didn't work. It didn't matter, okay? But, you know, the point is, I needed the academic freedom to teach that material that was crucial to the course, even though it was going to upset some people. It was crucial. You can't understand the Holocaust if you don't understand that. In Mein Kampf, Hitler says in the chapter in which he explains how he became an anti-Semite, by defending myself against the Jews, I am doing the Lord's work. Okay? Now you might say, well, he's totally bizarre. Maybe he is. But if you don't understand the roots of Christian anti-Semitism as it relates to the Holocaust, you're not going to get it. I'm sorry. I needed the academic freedom to do that. Now, if you say, well, we would like all of the faculty, I'm just going to make this up, and people are going to get mad, so I'm just telling you in advance, so go ahead and get mad, take care of your anger, okay? We would like, if my department, I was in 2 different departments, if they had said, this is pre-internet, I go back a lot of dinosaurs, if they would have said, we want everybody to use the same syllabus format to make it easy for the students. They're all over the place, lost. By the way, the students told us that yesterday, just to let you know, okay? You know what I would have said? Okay, sure. The controversy in my courses had nothing to do with where on the syllabus you placed my office hours. I don't care. Who cares? Okay, but don't then tell me, and you must, week 2, teach that chapter, and you're not allowed to teach this other. Now I'm going to be in your face on academic freedom. Okay? So when we talk about model customer service institution, I'm talking about what service we provide to the student that really meets the needs of the students without compromising the integrity of the course and the academic freedom of the instructor. This is going to be some work we're going to have to look at. And the customer service in advising and the customer service everywhere. Everyone at this college needs to be an agent of customer service. Everyone. Everyone. And by the way, a lot of people are. I'm actually very hopeful that LCC is going to just do amazing work with this initiative, because I see it. I'm not just talking about it. I see faculty walk students somewhere to get help that was out of their way because they knew it was the right thing to do. Elaine? Internal customers as well, yes. Just a couple more commitments. This came out of the meeting with the Senate when we talked about Operation 100%, and I thank the senators for this input. I think this is absolutely crucial. We commit to aligning and implementing continuous improvement and innovative processes to help the college move towards these goals. And part of this touches on our making sure that we create an environment in which people can take some risks, some good risks, even if they don't quite work out, but they're going towards the goal of success, okay? I don't think we do ourselves any favors as a college if faculty, for example, feel, here's an idea I'd love to pursue, I think it could work, I've done some reading on it, I'd like to experiment a little bit, but you know what, if I only get 8 students, they're gonna cancel the class, or if 6 students out of the 20 don't pass, I'm gonna get knocked down for that, et cetera. You know what, if I were faculty and I were in an environment like that, I'm not saying that's what we are, I'm saying, but if I were to be in an environment like that, I probably wouldn't take the risk either. I was very fortunate when I was faculty. We had just become a separate college within the district. California has college districts. We got to write our own, we got to rewrite the curriculum, we got to really start from the ground up, okay? And the administration basically said, do the work. They did not micromanage the work. That's how we created the special topics courses that allowed me to teach the Holocaust Studies course. Or a friend of mine and I, we team taught a course on gender politics. We had 10 students. We both got paid. They didn't cancel. They recognized that this was important, and the course transferred. It was an elective in one of the women's studies programs. I can't remember which one. But my point is, in order for us to have continuous improvement and innovation, we got to let people mess around. We have to. We've got to find ways to support faculty and students who need to experiment with some new ideas and innovative ideas to get towards the success. So again, I thank the Senate for coming up with this one. That was a really important one for us to add. And this is the final one that really underlies all of it. We have to commit to delivering institutional level support to achieve all of these ends. You all right? You guys good? Yeah? Good start? This is just the beginning. It's only the beginning, just the beginning. You're all rock stars. Thank you. See you at lunch.